You acting like you don't know. I tear the club up for show. This flow is gon' bring more dough. You know what you acting like you don't know. We got together to do this music and more we became.
Alright, I'm trying out a new little intro thing. But that pretty much wraps it up. I hope you liked it. Just something I'm trying out. So let's jump right into the part 2 of this commentary.
What the practice helps you do is lower your heart rate so that you don't fumble around and can actually do the mechanical things that you have to do.
This is probably one of the more sophisticated arguments against video games. I've seen it online plenty of times. I believe it originates from the Columbine school shooting, where some sort of supposed expert looked at the tapes of the shooting and determined that the shooter's heart rate was low and he was calm. He was a cold-blooded killer, essentially. I would argue that you can't really tell from a tape. I don't care how much of an expert you are, I don't really buy into that. But even if you can, it doesn't much matter, because if you're a psychopath, you're not going to feel remorse, you're not going to feel guilt over what you're doing, you're not going to feel fear either. That's one of the traits of being a psychopath, which is similar to antisocial personality disorder. So then, therefore, a psychopath would not be nervous when doing a shooting.
There are games that reward you for what Grossman in the interview called double tapping your victims. In other words, shooting them more than once. We know
I want to ask you about that, because it's the one thing with this story that didn't fit the usual profile. And a lot of these other ones, you know, you're I guess, taught to use your ammunition sparingly, make every shot count. So a lot of times we've seen headshots. What was really troubling with this case is these little kids were shot, I think, anywhere from 3 to 7 or maybe 11 times. Does that fit the gaming profile?
It can fit some of the games because you can, at close range, fire multiple rounds into your victims to make sure that they're dead. And there were so many rounds. Some of these kids apparently received 11 rounds at close range with a long gun that they were dead instantly.
All right. First of all, Jack Thompson mentioned something about what you can do to your victims in video games. Look, calling fake things, calling just pixels on a screen victims is so much BS. First of all, it's just to get attention, it's just to put fear into people, it's just to dramatize everything. It's nothing but a dramatic little person. And in addition, I've never heard of a game where you get X points for shooting someone pointlessly after they're dead, but let's assume that a game like that does exist. There probably is one. Why would the shooter at this high school shoot people multiple times? This elementary school shoot people multiple times? Well, first of all, he had a ton of ammo. He didn't need to conserve ammo, so he didn't. He wanted to make sure the people were dead. Aside from that, he was on a murderous rampage. What this really tells us is that the guy who went on a murderous rampage, yeah, you know that guy? Turns out that he was murderous when he killed those kids. What a surprise. The guy who went on a murderous rampage was in a murderous mindset and just shot the people tons of times. What a shock, right?
He made a decision to do it that way, and he had apparently hundreds and hundreds of rounds. There are games, combat games, in which you can walk into an airport terminal and blow away people in this fashion. So, folks, I'm not saying that the video games are the whole answer, but at a time like this, we've got to ask ourselves, yes, we've got to heal, but this is the best time to ask, how in the world and why did this happen? And this is part of the puzzle.
No, Jack. No, Jack. We know why this is the best time. Oh, we know. This is the best time for you to get attention. This isn't the best time for you to freaking make your point. No, we need to heal first before anyone engages in any debate. That's why I think the gun control debate at this point is pretty despicable as well. Although it's been a couple weeks now. I think people are jumping into it way too early. And it's really just to get attention. It's not about when the best time to do something is. Now, about the game he's referring to, Modern Warfare 2. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Where you can go infamously into an airport terminal and start shooting people. He leaves out the context of that. I mean, it's a pretty bloody mission, but first of all, you can skip it. It's optional. Second of all, it's not realistic, because there's no security that can stop you. And third of all, you're doing it to blend into a terrorist cult. Well, not a cult, but a terrorist organization. So there is context to it.
All right, let me throw this at you, because somebody posted this on Facebook this morning. It says, I'm sorry, Pat, but if you're against the media attacking guns, you cannot be on the side to limit video games because they both fall on the same line, freedom.
Well, okay. Two things. Antonin Scalia authored an opinion in the U.S. Supreme Court striking down California's video game law that sought to prohibit and restrict the sale of adult-rated games to adults. Now, Scalia, I think, made a mistake in saying that there's no evidence that there's harm induced into a young brain by playing these games. All the science indicates otherwise.
Now, whether you agree with him or not, Jack Thompson is notoriously right-wing in his positions. And so is Scalia. The fact that Scalia is not on his side says a heck of a lot. Now, Jack Thompson makes the erroneous claim, I might add, that all science indicates that video games cause more violence. Okay, first of all, like I've said repeatedly, science doesn't have a great way to measure violence. Because, I mean, if you just think about it, how do you measure violence? I mean, you can't just give someone a gun and see what they do. In addition, there are studies from the FBI, there are studies from the Secret Service, there are studies from Harvard Medical that show that video games do not increase violence.
Scan studies at Harvard and so forth. In fact, the same Supreme Court has struck down the juvenile death penalty because of the plasticity of young minds and the harm that can be done by environmental factors, and therefore we shouldn't execute teens because of that. So this opinion is a non sequitur. But
while it is true that the younger mind is very plastic and has a great deal of plasticity, that is, which means that it is very much influenced by environmental factors, more so than an older adult brain. While this is true, it does not mean that everything in the environment has a massive impact on a child's brain or a teenager's brain. You can still think for yourself. I mean, you can think of some time when you were young, or if you are young, sometime recently, when you were faced with something in your environment and you decided not to go along with that. A time you decided not to cheat, or a time you decided to cheat even. A time that you wanted to hit someone in the face because they're a bully or because they're annoying you or because whatever, and you didn't do it, and you controlled yourself. You aren't just influenced by the environment, you can still think.
Let's assume that we are never going to have any laws restricting the sale of adult games to adults. Nobody's talking about banning these games. And, these people always go to DEFCON 5 on this issue.
Now, interestingly, Jack's misinformation hurts him here. The California law was actually, I'm 90% sure, on selling violent games to minors, not adults. But as Jack Thompson says, he wants laws limiting the sale of adult games to adults. How else would you define a ban? I mean, you call it DEFCON 5, but that's pretty much what a ban is, isn't it? The banning of adult games to adults? Then who's going to buy it? I mean, it's implied that it's going to be banned for kids too, so it's banned for everybody. So that is by definition a ban. And even if he's just talking about re-rating games to be rated adults only, like the Grand Theft Auto series, in the United States, that is a heck of a lot like a ban. Because those games are behind counters, you don't see them, you have to ask for them, and it would drastically hurt sales of games.
The issue is, what should parents do? At the very least, they ought to know. Any parents listening to this program, if you've got your young kids playing these games, stop. That's not a governmental program. That's good parenting.
Yes, parents. Stop because a random asshole on the radio told you to. That makes sense. And maybe that's a little ironic for me to say, being a random guy on YouTube. But nonetheless, are you really going to listen to a guy who can't form a coherent argument using any legitimate sources on the radio? On a talk show, of all things? Is that guy really going to convince you?
Secondly, on the sales side, you've got the industry which runs the ESRB. You've got the lunatics have the keys to that asylum, and they're the ones who rate their own games.
I've already addressed this idea that the industry owns the ESRB. I believe it was in the video Jack Thompson's Bias on Video Games, although it could possibly have been in the Fox News commentary. I'll double check that and post a link. But I've already addressed this idea. Here's a big surprise. It's not true. Grand Theft Auto would be rated teen if that were true, okay? I mean, just think about it. These games are not getting the ratings they want. San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, was at one point re-rated adults only, a certain version of it. They didn't want that. In fact, they didn't want that to a degree where they edited the game. I mean, think about that. Grand Theft Auto and Rockstar edited the game. They changed the game to get an M rating. They're not known for pulling their punches.
And yet they say we won't sell these M-rated games to anyone under 18. Nonsense. You can go on BestBuy.com, Target.com, and so forth, and any kid with a credit card can buy any game of any rating and have it delivered.
Alright, this is probably Jack Thompson's best point, because, at least it's true. But I have two main arguments against this. First of all, it is actually illegal to use credit cards to check someone's age, so these companies don't really have a choice. And second of all, parents can check what was bought on credit cards. So unless you're stupid enough to give like a 10-year-old a credit card, the parents can check and see what their kid's been buying. So if they don't approve of an M-rated game, they can take the game away because they'll know that their kid bought it. If your 8-year-old just bought Grand Theft Auto 4, yeah, you should probably take that away. But you'll be able to see the purchase on the credit card. All this in addition to the argument I previously expostulated, which was pretty much Jack Thompson's entire argument that video games cause violence. The evidence is that they don't.
At the very least, the video game industry ought to say, we're going to have age verification at those sites other than asking, how old are you? And when it comes to alcohol or firearms sold on the internet, you have to put in a government ID.
Did Jack Thompson seriously just compare buying a violent video game, like Uncharted, to buying alcohol and firearms? Do I even have to explain why that's stupid?
And then to make the purchase and to prove what your age is, a driver's license in effect. And when it's delivered, an adult has to sign for it. There you go. But millions of units of these games are being sold to kids underage. And by the way, it's against the law to use a credit card as an age verifier. And the Congress has made this determination. You can't just present a credit card and have the presumption be that you're 18. So you can't do it that way.
All right, I've already pretty much addressed these points, or you can infer from what I've said before that these points are not valid. Now, the black hole of stupidity continues to grow larger and larger. So this is going to have to take yet another part, a third part, to this video. See you then. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. I'm sure that you all have something you'd like to comment on about what Jack Thompson said, if you're a reasonable person. And please share this video. I would greatly appreciate it.